Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with author, educator, and worldwide authority, Dr. Weiser Cornell. She stands as a worldwide authority on focusing, the emotional self-healing method developed by her close colleague, Eugene. She has taught focusing in more than 20 countries over the past 30 years. Dr. Cornell's books include the bestselling The Power of Focusing, A Practical Guide to Emotional Self-Healing, and her latest, Untangling, How You Can Transform What's Impossibly Stuck, co-authored by Barbara McGavin. Anne tells her own story about getting past writer's block and releasing addiction to alcohol with the powerful yet simple method of untangling. Enjoy this story.
Well, hey, it's great, again, to touch base with you. I'm looking forward to getting into your life as an author and an educator. To begin that, I want to know, 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out how long this pandemic was going to last and all the ramifications. So I'm curious how you survived that time period and how it affected the way that you do your work now.
Such a wonderful question. You know, we're still in that time. It's changed our lives permanently. And although it was a scary time for me and many people that I knew, all the changes that it made in my life were positive. It's amazing to look back and think about that. For example, I'd been traveling all over the world teaching, and for 2020 I had 5 international trips planned with my teaching partner. We were going to go to Japan, Hong Kong, Germany, Switzerland, Canada. Canceled all of them. And instead of those travels, we wrote a book, which is going to have a bigger impact on the world and feel more like what I want to give to the world than those trainings. They'd be done by now, but the book is something you can hold in your hand. So that was great. Also, my business was all set up to do remote teaching. We'd been doing remote teaching as well as in-person teaching. We were right in a position to just move right into all remote teaching. My employees love working remotely. And we did better in our business, money that we could turn around and put into new products and into paying more employees. We did better in 2020 and 2021 than any other year. So it's funny. Oh, plus, I have a sweetheart. I live with my partner. We're up to 24 years and counting. And he and I got much closer because of spending that much time together. So I would say, interesting. It's been all good.
Wow. What a wonderful summary, especially with the book. Just what a great way of putting it, that you have something permanent that's going to stand the test of time. That's wonderful. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis for a living here in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders, probably a native audience, and it's career day. And one of the kids looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
Honey? I don't know if I'd say honey. But, you know, I show people that they can love themselves, and I show people how. And then I might say, to the whole group, do you love yourselves? Because you get to love yourself completely, because there's no reason to feel bad about yourself ever. So that's just one of the things I do, but I think that's how I'd explain it to a third grade audience. One of the main things I teach people is how not to be under the thumb, under the lash of an inner critic. Those inner critics that show up and say, don't even try because you're going to fail. And what makes you think you can do something like this? It's tragic how many people have a voice like that inside themselves. And what's even more tragic is that inner voice actually loves you, but is so anxious that it's got to express its love by telling you that you're doing something wrong and that you're never going to make it. It's actually afraid you're never going to make it. It's saying the opposite of what it really means. And so what I show people is how to hear that inner voice and communicate with it compassionately, so it starts actually telling them how much it loves them instead of undermining them and putting them down. And I love that part of my work.
And I think that's so essential to everybody. I think we're our own worst critics. So when you can embrace that truth, that has to be a wonderful breakthrough to be able to witness.
Everybody has so much potential, more than they're using. And everybody has a reason for being here that they get to find inside. They can't find it by watching other people and copying them. You find it inside yourself. And it's the other thing I teach people is that inside you have an inner knowing, an inner sense of rightness of what is right for you. And the more you can listen to that, the more you're on your own track, and the more you can be successful by your own light.
So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a writer. And I would even write little poems and stories back then. And that's what I would say if somebody said, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? I want to be a writer. Which is interesting because I got up to my 40s and I had a dream of writing a book. And that had not written. That early desire to become a writer turned into going to college, going to grad school, writing a dissertation, but there were no stories and books coming in those days. But the more I started to do this work that I do now, the inner relationship focusing, the more I thought, I love to write a book that really helps people change their lives. I bet I could do that. That's what I want to contribute to the world. My teacher, the guy who developed focusing, had written a book. There was one book out in the world called Focusing. And that had been 20 years before. So I'm in my 40s and I'm thinking, the one thing I want to do with my life is to write. But I had writer's block. I couldn't get myself. I could get myself to sit down and start writing, but within 20 or 30 minutes, I'd be off cleaning the refrigerator or something, anything to keep from staying in that seat and doing that writing. And that went on for years. And then I got interested in that. Why do people have a longing, a dream, a knowing that what they want to really bring into the world, they know what it is. They feel like they have an inner flame, an inner brightness. And I met other people like this too through my work. But it doesn't happen. They have a block. So what is a block? How do you release it? It's such a mystery, such an interesting mystery. In my childhood, I saw my father have big dreams and not be able to bring them to reality. So it was a deeply held question for me. And I found a way to release my writer's block.
So what was that?
It's an amazing story. Yeah.
It is, certainly is. So speaking of that literature path, what was the book for you when you were growing up that was special, that you loved, that maybe either made you want to write or open the doors up to you wanting to read more?
Well, what's funny is that I really loved fiction, and I still do. My reading for fun is all stories. I loved stories. When I was a kid, I liked stories about horses, and I loved mystery stories. I still do. I loved stories about other times and other places, Greeks, Romans, people in England. But I don't feel a calling to write those things. The calling is more to write something that awakens possibility for people. And that's what I've been writing ever since I released my writer's block, is that kind of book. My motto is relieve suffering and awaken possibility.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for you in your life?
Well, I could say my mentor, the guy who wrote the book called Focusing. And there are a couple of other people. He had a mentor. He had a teacher. Carl Rogers, who I actually did get to meet in the last few years of his life. Carl Rogers was one of the greatest humanistic psychologists He's the one who created a kind of psychotherapy called client-centered therapy. He invited the whole idea that therapy, psychotherapy, emotional healing could be an equal partnership, that it's not Sigmund Freud sitting in a chair behind someone on a couch and never saying anything, just taking notes and diagnosing and analysis and taking notes and analyzing. Carl Rogers said, we're in a partnership. He also said, each person has inside them, he called it an actualizing tendency. In other words, what we find when we go deeper inside ourselves is life, fuller life, waiting to be lived. It's something positive. So there's a way of understanding emotional healing and human growth from the positive point of view, rather than looking and seeing what's wrong and has to be fixed. And so that's been really one of the hallmarks of my work and what I believe and what I teach people and what I know to be true, is we get to see the life and the light in each other rather than what's wrong and what needs to be fixed. In fact, you know what? Fixing doesn't work. If you try to figure out what's wrong and fix it, it actually doesn't even work, which is what I discovered when I began getting interested in blocks and what it is that gets in the way of people becoming what they really want to become. You're trying to fix yourself. You're thinking of yourself as having something wrong with you, and then you're trying to treat yourself as a problem. And there's a whole different way to do it, which is to listen and sense for the life energy that's wanting to live. What's wanting to live inside you? So I would say that's a hero. That's an inspiration to me.
What is your motivation to do the work that you do? You have to give a lot of yourself, and you're changing people and changing their lives. What is that motivation for you to do that, to get up every day and do that, and to also evolve as a human yourself?
I love it. It's as simple as that, Joe. I love it. And for instance, yesterday, it was a holiday, Hope you had a good holiday. I actually did some sessions with people. It's what I want to do when I wake up in the morning, is sit with somebody and help them get in touch with what's inside them that wants to move forward. By the way, getting in touch with what wants to move forward can also include getting in touch with painful places, hurt places, wounded places. This is not about ignoring those, but it's about being that strong self that you are, that can turn toward the hurt places inside. Not be the hurt places, but turn toward the hurt places and give them caring and support. And the privilege of sitting with somebody who's on that healing journey. And I am not the person who's fixing them. I'm their accompaniment. And yeah, I have skills. You get a lot of skills when you do something over and over for 10,000 times over more than 35 years. But mostly my skills are being there, stepping back, finding the right moment to say what will help. And every time I do a session like that, I'm more energized afterwards. I'm not tired at the end of a day like that. It's what I want to do. It's what makes me happy. Yeah.
So, you have to give, you're helping clients, you're, in a way giving good advice. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Well, then I have to talk about my mentor. He's the guy who developed the method called focusing. He has an amazing history. He came over from Nazi-held Austria as a Jewish boy at age 11 without a word of English, landed in New York. By the time I met him, he was in his 40s. And he wrote this book, Focusing, which became a bestseller. That he's the one who tirelessly made it a bestseller by continuing to make appearances and talk to people. And I was his student. And at first I followed his method exactly. But then I began to realize, well, you know, the people I'm working with, we could change this method a little. And I think there's some ways we could actually improve it. And I began to do that, but I was kind of shy about telling him about that. I wasn't completely sure that he'd be happy about the changes I was making and the fact that I was changing his method at all. And then it got to the point where I got over that writer's block and I wrote that first book, The Power of Focusing. And I sent him a copy. And I didn't hear from him. So a couple months later, I met him at a conference and felt inside myself a little unsure. You know, how are we going to be? How's he going to feel about me? How's he going to feel about what I'm doing? And I saw him at this conference for the first time that day, walking toward me across the room with his arms wide open. And as he got close enough for me to hear him, he said, "Ann, keep going." And he had a new book, and I handed it to him to write in, to write something for me. And he wrote those words in that book, which I cherish. I have that book next to me all the time. And those words are, "Keep going!" exclamation point. Really, those are the words I've lived by. That's good advice. Keep going.
Certainly is. So, of all of the things that you've accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
You know, this book, this new book that I've written that's coming out on August 15th, is called Untangling, How You Can Transform What's Impossibly Stuck. It's a collaboration with my longtime colleague, Barbara McGavin. She and I have been teaching together for 30 years. We're the ones who travel all over the world together. That friendship has not been an easy one. We're very different people. And the fact that she and I have been able to collaborate even though we're so different, and from that collaboration bring forth something that neither one of us could have done separately. I am proudest of that. That book is my life work, and it's her life work. And it is the result of a collaboration that from which I learned so much. So that's what I'm proudest of, yeah.
So at the end of the day, Ann, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I do run the show. I mean, I have employees, and I have students and trainees, and so I'm a leader. And my perception of me is that I lead by listening. That I know I have a vision, and my vision is flexible. I'm more interested, speaking of collaboration, I collaborate with my employees rather than directing my employees, which has been enormously fruitful because they're brilliant. So I'm proud of the fact that I lead by listening. That's how I would describe myself.
So if anyone wants to pick up the new book, Untangling, they want to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Focusing Resources is the name of my business, and focusingresources.com is my website. And if you go to focusingresources.com /UT book, that's UTBOOK, then you'll be able to sign up now to get news of that new book when it comes out August 15th.
Wonderful, Ann. This has been very, very refreshing and inspirational. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story and your passion for changing the world and doing good work.
My pleasure, Joe. You're doing good work, too. Thank you for your work.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.